I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit as I move along. Now, I did just read very briefly in the Book of Ether to keep our timelines lined up. And now we return to the story of Solomon in the Bible. This will be the first book of Kings, chapter 3. In the previous chapter, Solomon is made king, David dies, and Solomon does his initial acts, putting down the conspiracy of Adonijah and his co-conspirators of Joab and Abiathar. Now we continue with his story. Chapter 3. Solomon loves the Lord and keeps his commandments. The Lord appears to Solomon and promises him a wise and an understanding heart. He judges between two harlots and determines maternity of a child. Now, before I continue reading this, though, I do have to mention that this chapter does contain Joseph Smith translations. I love the Joseph Smith translation. What this is an inspired translation or correction of the Bible done by Joseph Smith to restore those portions that had been lost over the years. Let us continue reading now. And Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter, and brought her into the city of David, until he had made an end of building his own house, and the house of the Lord, and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Only the people sacrificed in high places, because there was no house built unto the Lord, under the name of the Lord, until those days. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incenses in high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for there was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. Okay, so first things to note here, the high places. Again, I just want to keep reiterating, there were many places where people could rightly sacrifice, could do the ordinances of individual worship. Now, the daily sacrifices and the sacrifices for the new moon and all those special ones, those had to be done at the tabernacle by the high priest. But locally, you could go to the high places and do your sin offerings and burnt offerings for individuals. And that's what Solomon did. Now, the tabernacle, if you will recall, was in Gibeon. And so that is where Solomon, as king, would go to do his sacrifice. Gibeon was not too far from Jerusalem. I think no more than 20 miles. So it wasn't too far. Anyways, the Joseph Smith translation, as I mentioned, this is actually the first 9 verses have these translations. And since we've read a paragraph, let us go to the Joseph Smith translation of these first, 5 verses, right? No, 4 verses. First 4 verses. Let's read the Joseph Smith translation. It says here, And the Lord was not pleased with Solomon, for he made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter to wife, and brought her into the house of David, until he had made an end of building his own house, and the house of the Lord, and the wall of Jerusalem round about. And the Lord blessed Solomon for the people's sake only. And the people sacrificed in high places, because there was no house built under the name of the Lord until those days. And because the Lord blessed Solomon as he was walking in the statutes of David his father, he began to love the Lord, and he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places, and he called on the name of the Lord. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for Gibeon was in a great high place. And Solomon offered upon that altar in Gibeon 1,000 burnt offerings. Now this gives us a little bit more insight into Solomon. I've heard it said that the first sign of Solomon's fall, because Solomon does fall, was that he spent 13 years building his own house and only 7 building the temple, which we will get into in more detail later. But according to the Joseph Smith translation, this is his first error. He becomes king, and rather than trusting on the Lord, he turns to political alliance with Egypt, and he marries the daughter of Egypt. He marries a non-Israelite, in order to secure political alliance. And then he brings her to Jerusalem and puts her in the house of David. And it says here that at the beginning here, God is not blessing Solomon. He is very displeased, but he doesn't like it. He said, Solomon, you're doing wrong. You don't make an affinity with Pharaoh. You trust God. But because the people were still the people were following David's counsel. And they were doing what was right. They were following God. They were seeking after God. And so God said, I can't abandon the people. And so he blesses Solomon. As the king, he gives Solomon what he needs. Excuse me. He blesses Solomon for the people's sake only. But then Solomon starts realizing that God's blessing him. He says, wait a minute, yeah, God is blessing me. And that's when Solomon turns to start following the statutes of David. In other words, when he first became king, he was not really following David. He was not trying to follow David. He did not start following David's counsel until he saw the blessings that God was giving. That's when he starts seeking the Lord. And so we can see this in the very beginning. Solomon is not a great righteous ruler. He's your average king. And he becomes great when he starts seeing the blessings of God. That's when he turns to God and he starts following the statutes. When we see this, his later fall away from those statutes makes a little more sense. So anyways, let us continue. Verse 5. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask what I will give thee. And Solomon said, thou hast shewed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth, and in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or to come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered, nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem, and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings, and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants. Now let us consider that a moment. That is, God comes to him. Remember that Solomon is now following the Lord. He didn't start off following the Lord, but he is following the Lord now. And God comes to him and says, okay, you're doing okay. What can I give you to help you out here? Basically, God is coming to Solomon and saying, look, what do you need? You've turned to me. You are now following my laws. You are taking the advice of your father. What blessing can I give you? Now, if Solomon was always following God and was always the wise man that he's known to be, why would he ask this? He asks for an understanding heart. It makes sense that he started off not really sure of himself. He wasn't following God. And now he is, and God comes and says, hey, I can bless you. And then he says, okay, well, help me follow you. Give me the understanding and the wisdom to know what to do in order to lead this people as you would have me lead them. We see Solomon is not just, this isn't just Solomon being all nice and humble. This is Solomon saying, I haven't been following you in the past, and I want to be following you now, so help me understand how to do that. But now let us look at the Joseph Smith translations here. Starting in verse 5, there is no translation for 10, 11, or 13, but let us look at this here. It says, and the Lord God hearkened unto Solomon, and appeared unto him in a dream by night, and said, ask what I shall give thee. Remember, it said that he called on the name of the Lord. So again, this isn't just God appearing out of the blue to Solomon. This is him appearing in response to Solomon's prayer. Verse 6, and Solomon said, thou hast shewed unto thy servant David my father great things, according to thy mercy, when he walked before thee in truth, and in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father over thy people. And I know not how to lead them, to go out or to come in before them. And thy servant am as a little child in the midst of thy people, whom thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered, nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy people, so great a people? So I like this too. Now, pay attention. He doesn't say he is a little child, like it does in King James. He says he is like a little child. He doesn't have the wisdom to lead the people. And it says, I know not how to lead them, to go in or come in before them. Now that is him admitting that he's not good at this. Then we get this in verse 12 of this Joseph Smith translation here. It says, behold, I have done according to thy word. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none made king over Israel like unto thee, before thee. Neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. I find that interesting too, because this is what this is basically saying is, Solomon was a very wise man. But to say that he was the most wise is not accurate. Was he more wise than Moses? Probably not. He is the most wise king to ever rule over the house of Israel. That doesn't mean he was wiser than the prophets. But we also have this in verse 14. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, then I will lengthen thy days, and thou shalt not walk in unrighteousness, as did thy father David. Now that's an interesting change too, because frequently God still compares kings to David. But he's saying, Solomon, look, you do better than David, and you will be blessed more than David. And when we look at David was greatly blessed, and he was a great leader. To do better than David and to be blessed more than David, that is a truly great promise. But this is getting a little long, so I'm going to stop it here. We'll finish this chapter in the next video.